367 seconds, 6 minutes and 7 seconds. The new record, and nobody in that room saw it coming. Not the three attorneys, not the Republican members who had spent the morning asking softball questions, not the journalists who had covered 100 congressional hearings and thought they understood the rhythm of how these things unfolded. Nobody expected Congressman Ted Lieu to reach into his folder and pull out that wire transfer. Because it was not the wire transfer anyone knew existed. The public record had one wire. The subpoena responses had documented one wire. The financial forensics team had traced one wire. Everyone in that room who had done their homework believed there was one transaction at the center of this investigation. There were two, and the second one had a memo field. Federal wire transfers contain a memo field, a text box, optional, rarely used for anything beyond a reference number or a contract code. In 40 years of financial forensics work, the Treasury investigator who found it told Liu's staff it was the most explicit thing she had ever seen written in a federal wire transfer memo field by someone who apparently believed nobody would ever read it. 6 words. Split the money 50-50. Done. Let me take you inside that room. House Oversight Committee, room 2154. Thursday afternoon, 2:31 p.m. Eastern. The hearing had been running for 90 minutes. Standard financial oversight questions, budget reconciliation, contractor payment processes. Liu had been quiet for most of it, asking procedural questions, taking notes, letting other members establish the baseline. He checked his folder twice and said nothing unusual. Miller was comfortable. 3 attorneys, a thick binder. He had answered everything correctly and completely and with the precision of someone who had been through this before and knew how to make a hearing feel like a formality. Then Louis took the microphone. Mr. Miller, I want to talk about wire transfers. Miller nodded slightly. DHS processes a substantial volume of financial transactions across multiple program areas. I am happy to address, I am not asking about multiple transactions. Louis' voice was level, precise, the voice of a former Air Force prosecutor who spent years building cases that could not be broken. I am asking about 2 specific transactions, from the same account to the same receiving institution on the same day. He opened the folder. On April 3rd of this year, a wire transfer of $6.2 billion was sent from a DHS emergency operations account to Cayman National Bank in Georgetown, Grand Cayman. That transfer has been previously discussed in congressional proceedings. It has been documented. It is in the record. He pulled out the first document. What has not been discussed, what has not been documented, what is not in any record that has been made public until this moment, is that on April 3rd at 11:47 a.m., 4 hours after the first wire was sent, a second wire transfer was generated from the same DHS emergency operations account. Same originating institution, same receiving bank, different amount, different receiving account, and a memo field that was not left blank. He set the document on the table. The second wire transfer was for $892 million. Sent to a separately numbered account at Cayman National Bank, an account registered to a different entity than the first transfer, an entity called Meridian Capital Advisors. And in the memo field of that $892 million wire transfer, someone typed 6 words. He paused for exactly 3 seconds, split the money 50-50, done. The room went silent, not the anticipatory silence of people waiting for more information, the specific pressurized silence of a room full of people who just heard something that rewrote every assumption they had walking in that morning. Because those 6 words did not describe a financial transaction. They described a conversation, an agreement, a division of something between at least 2 parties. And that division had been memorialized in the memo field of a federal wire transfer sent from a government account, apparently by someone who either did not know those fields were logged permanently in federal banking systems or did not believe anyone would ever look. Lieu waited for the silence to settle completely. Then he continued, the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network logs every international wire transfer over $10 million. The logs include every field in the transfer record, including the memo field, including 6 words written by someone sending $892 million from a federal government account on April 3rd at 11:47 in the morning. He pulled out a second document. I traced Meridian Capital Advisors, incorporated in the Cayman Islands on March 29th, 5 days before receiving $892 million. The company has no employees, no documented business operations, no regulatory filings in any jurisdiction. The registered agent is the same corporate services firm managing 14,000 other shell companies at the same address that appeared in the first wire transfer investigation. He set the second document down. 2 wire transfers, same day, same originating account, same receiving bank, same registered agent for the shell company on the receiving end. One publicly known, one that has never appeared in any congressional record until this moment. And a memo field on the second transfer that says, in plain language, that money was being split between parties. He looked directly at Miller. Mr. Miller, I have 2 questions. Who received the $892 million sent to Meridian Capital Advisors? And what does split the money 50-50 mean? Miller's lead attorney had both hands on the table. His second attorney had closed her notebook and placed both palms flat on its cover, as though steadying herself. Miller himself had gone still in a way that was different from the composed stillness of a prepared witness. This was the stillness of someone whose body had stopped functioning normally. Lieu pulled out a third document. The authorization chain for the second wire transfer follows the same structure as the first. DHS Chief Financial Officer signature on April 1st. Treasury Department signature on April 2nd. And a Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy signature on April 3rd at 11:31 a.m., 16 minutes before the second wire was sent. He held it up toward the cameras. The signature on the authorization form for the $892 million transfer is the same signature that authorized the $6.2 billion transfer. The same person approved both wires on the same morning. And 16 minutes after signing the second authorization, $892 million left a federal government account with the words split the money 50-50 in the memo field. He set the document down. Mr. Miller, that signature belongs to you. Lieu pulled out his phone, opened the stopwatch, set it on the table without ceremony. I have 2 questions. Who received the $892 million? And what does split the money 50-50 mean? I am going to time how long you decline to answer. He pressed start. 10 seconds, Miller's hands flat on the table. 20 seconds, his lead attorney leaning close, whispering rapidly. Miller staring at the table. 30 seconds, a Republican committee member from Texas spoke. Ted, are you saying there was a second wire transfer nobody knew about, with a memo field saying split 50-50? Lieu nodded once. Same day, same originating account, $892 million. 6 words in the memo field that have never appeared in any public record before today. 40 seconds, Miller said nothing. 60 seconds, 1 full minute. Lieu stood from his seat and walked slowly toward the center of the room. The phrase split the money 50-50 implies a prior agreement, an agreement between at least 2 parties about how a sum was going to be divided. The $892 million represents roughly 12.6% of the total funds moved from DHS accounts on April 3rd, which raises an obvious question. If $892 million is 1/2, what is the other half, and who received it? 80 seconds, Miller's jaw tightened, visible from 3 angles. 100 seconds, the 50-50 split implies symmetry. Someone sent $892 million and believed that $892 million was going somewhere else at the same time to complete the division. I have subpoenaed every wire transfer from DHS accounts on April 3rd. There are 11 transfers in total. I have traced all 11. And I have identified a third transfer separate from the 2 I have already described for $891 million sent to an account in Singapore at 1:14 p.m. that same afternoon. $892 million and $891 million, a $1 million difference on a $1.7 billion combined transfer. That is not a rounding error. That is a split. 120 seconds, 2 full minutes. And the memo field on the Singapore transfer does not say split the money 50-50. It says received, 1 word, as if confirming a transaction that had been arranged elsewhere. 140 seconds. Liu stopped walking. Mr. Miller, I have now described 3 wire transfers on April 3rd from DHS accounts, 6 buying $2 billion to the first Cayman account, $892 million to Meridian Capital Advisors with the words split the money 50-50 in the memo field, and $891 million to a Singapore account with the word received in the memo field. Those last 2 amounts total $1.783 billion. Split 50-50 with confirmation language on both ends. 160 seconds. Someone who sent federal funds used a government wire transfer system to document a private financial arrangement in plain language in a field that is permanently logged in federal banking records. That is either the most confident act of financial crime I have encountered in 25 years of prosecutorial experience, or someone believed with absolute certainty that nobody would ever look at the memo field of a federal wire transfer. 180 seconds, 3 full minutes. His lead attorney stood. Mr. Chairman, questions about specific wire transfer memo fields involve technical banking documentation that my client is not positioned to address without. Lee turned toward him for the first time. Your client signed the authorization form for the wire transfer containing those 6 words. He is positioned to address it. He simply needs to decide whether he will. Sit down. The attorney sat. 200 seconds. Lieu walked back toward the witness table. The authorization chain exists. The memo field exists. The Singapore confirmation transfer exists. The 50-50 split is documented across 2 federal wire records on the same afternoon. I do not need your cooperation to establish what happened. I need your cooperation to establish who the other party to the split was. Because your signature is on one side of this and someone else is on the other. 220 seconds. Miller's hands had moved on the table, fingers pressed together, tight. 240 seconds, 4 full minutes. A Democrat from New York stood. Mr. Chairman, we are watching someone refuse to explain a federal wire transfer from a government account that contains the words, split the money 50-50. That memo field is a confession and we are all reading it. 260 seconds. Liu stood completely still. Mr. Miller, the Singapore account that received $891 million on April 3rd, belongs to a holding company that has a documented ownership connection to a private equity fund that was under SEC investigation as of March of this year. That fund was represented at a meeting in your office on March 28th by 2 of its principals. I have the building security logs, I have the visitor records, and I have the wire transfer that arrived in that fund's affiliated account the afternoon of April 3rd, 6 days after those principals sat in your office. 280 seconds, 300 seconds, 5 full minutes, 320 seconds. His second attorney stood. Mr. Chairman, we formally invoke. The chairman cut her off before she finished. Sit down. Your client will answer, or we proceed to contempt immediately. She sat. 340 seconds, 350, 360, 365, 366, 367. Lieu stopped the timer. He looked at the display, then he looked at the committee. 6 minutes and 7 seconds. He turned to the chairman. The witness has refused to answer. I move to hold Stephen Miller in contempt of Congress. I further move to refer this matter to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation under 18 U.S.C. 1956, federal money laundering, 18 U.S.C. 371, conspiracy, and 18 U.S.C. 211, bribery of public officials, given that the memo field language implies a private division of federal funds between parties. I further move to subpoena all communications between Miller's office and the Singapore Holding Company and its affiliated private equity fund for the 60 days preceding April 3rd. All 3 motions seconded immediately. All 3 passed unanimously. Miller had not spoken in 6 minutes and 7 seconds. Both attorneys were writing when the votes concluded. Liu gathered his documents, picked up the wire transfer confirmation with the memo field, held it up toward the cameras one final time. 6 words, split the money 50-50, done, written in the memo field of a federal wire transfer, permanently logged in the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network database. Signed by the same hand that approved $6.2 billion to the Cayman Islands 4 hours earlier. and confirmed by a matching transfer to Singapore that says received. He set the document on the committee table. 367 seconds of silence does not change what is in that memo field. The words are in the federal record. The authorization signature is in the federal record. The Singapore confirmation is in the federal record. And the private equity fund principals who sat in your office on March 28th have names that federal prosecutors now have a specific obligation to investigate. He looked directly at Miller, split the money 50-50. 6 words that somebody typed into a federal banking system on April 3rd, believing nobody would ever read them. 367 seconds of silence trying to make those 6 words mean something other than what they say. It did not work. The memo field is permanent, and so is the record. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because the identity of the private equity fund and its principals who visited Miller's office on March 28th is the next thing this committee makes public. And when those names are released alongside the Singapore transfer confirmation, split the money 50-50 will be the least surprising thing about this story.